Reporters stood outside the courthouse for weeks chasing reactions from angry citizens and stunned officials. Legal analysts debated Lydia Caldwell's undercover operation on television panels every night. Some called her brilliant. Some called her reckless. Some called her dangerous. Lydia ignored all of them, because while television hosts argued about politics and procedure, she was sitting at a folding table inside the Caldwell Community Legal Center, helping an elderly man understand a water bill he had been too embarrassed to ask questions about. That was the part cameras never stayed long enough to film. Real justice was rarely dramatic. Most of the time it looked like paperwork, exhausted people, and someone finally listening. The legal center operated out of the rebuilt property on 4th Street, where Lydia's mother's house had once stood before the city condemned it under fraudulent zoning claims. The old empty lot that had once symbolized theft now held a 2-story brick building with wide windows and a bronze sign near the entrance. Caldwell Community Legal Center, the law belongs to everyone. Every morning before sunrise, people lined up outside the doors. Single mothers fighting eviction notices. Veterans denied disability benefits. Grandparents drowning in debt collection scams. Teenagers trapped in probation systems designed to keep them paying fees forever. For years they had nowhere to go. Now they had somewhere, and word spread quickly. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Phones rang constantly. Law students carried stacks of files through narrow hallways. Volunteer attorneys sat shoulder to shoulder with frightened residents who had spent most of their lives believing courtrooms were places where people like them automatically lost. Kayla sat behind the front desk answering calls with a confidence that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Caldwell Legal Center, this is Kayla speaking. How can we help you today? She still remembered the holding cell. Still remembered crying because she thought missing bail meant losing her diner job and her future with it. Now she wore business clothes, carried legal pads, and attended night classes for her paralegal certification. Sometimes when new clients came in shaking with fear, she would quietly kneel beside them and say the words Lydia once told her. You are not the problem. The system failed you. We're going to fix it. And every single time she said it, she meant it. Across the room, Darius Turner leaned over a cluttered desk reviewing medical school applications. The old anger still lived inside him sometimes. Not the explosive kind. The heavy kind. The kind carried by people who realize how close they came to losing their future because someone powerful needed an easy target. He had spent months after his release struggling with bitterness. Some nights Lydia found him sitting alone in the legal center long after everyone left, staring silently at case files. You can't build your future by living inside what they did to you, she told him one evening. They stole years from me, Darius replied quietly. Yes, Lydia said. And now you must decide whether they also get to steal the man you become afterward. That sentence stayed with him. Now he volunteered 3 nights a week mentoring teenagers who had been pushed into the juvenile system for minor offenses. He recognized the look in their eyes immediately. The distrust. The exhaustion. The expectation that every adult in authority was about to hurt them. He worked hard to prove otherwise. One snowy afternoon, a 15-year-old boy named Marcus arrived at the center, wearing an ankle monitor for missing school too many times while caring for his sick mother. The probation officer called him non-compliant. Darius called him overwhelmed. That distinction changed everything. You want to know something? Darius told the boy while helping him fill out forms. The people writing reports about you only see behavior. They don't see context. But context matters. Marcus stared down at the table. No one ever asks why, he whispered. Darius nodded slowly. I know. Upstairs in her office, Lydia Caldwell stood near the window watching snow gather along 4th Street. The neighborhood looked different now. Alive again. The abandoned houses had been restored using money recovered from the Pine View corruption case. The first snow of winter arrived quietly over Oak Creek. Not the violent kind of storm that shuts down highways or rattles windows through the night. This snow drifted down slowly, almost gently, soft white flakes falling across courthouse steps that for years had carried the weight of fear. By December, the headlines had spread far beyond the county line. Disgraced judge sentenced in federal corruption case. Mayor pleads guilty in property fraud scheme. Supreme Court justice exposes systemic abuse in hometown courthouse. News vans came and went. Local contractors rebuilt porches. Streetlights were repaired. Parks reopened. Families returned. Children laughed outside again. That sound mattered most to Lydia. For years the neighborhood had sounded tense. Suspicious. Quiet in the unnatural way communities become quiet when fear settles into them long enough. Now there was noise again. Normal noise. Music from passing cars. Arguments over basketball games. Dogs barking. Life. Her clerk Trevor entered carrying a stack of federal briefs. "You're supposed to review these before Washington calls again," he reminded her carefully. Lydia glanced at the paperwork. "Tell Washington democracy will survive another hour." Trevor smiled despite himself. "You know the Chief Justice is furious you extended your leave." "The Chief Justice," Lydia replied calmly, "is free to come down here and process eviction appeals himself if he's impatient." Trevor set the files down. He had worked for Lydia nearly 8 years now, and she still intimidated him slightly. Not because she was cruel, because she noticed everything. "You're staying longer, aren't you?" he asked. Lydia looked back out the window. "Yes." "Because of Oak Creek?" "No," she said softly. "Because this is happening everywhere." Trevor grew quiet, and they both knew she was right. Oak Creek wasn't unique. That was the terrifying part. Everywhere across the country there were small courtrooms where exhausted people stood before officials who had forgotten that law without humanity becomes cruelty wearing paperwork. Lydia had exposed one courthouse. But the disease was larger than one building. That realization stayed heavy inside her. Weeks later, former Judge Harlan Whitaker sat alone inside a prison visitation room, staring at his own reflection in the scratched metal table. Prison had changed him quickly. The arrogance disappeared first. Then the certainty. Then the illusion that he mattered more than everyone else. Now he looked smaller somehow. Older. He wore state-issued glasses because his expensive ones had broken during intake processing. Across from him sat his daughter, Emily Whitaker, a college sophomore who hadn't visited until now. She looked uncomfortable. Not angry. Disappointed. That hurt him more. "I still don't understand," she said quietly. "Why would you do all of it?" Whitaker rubbed trembling hands together. "At first it didn't feel like corruption," he admitted. "It never does." He stared down at the table. "It starts small. Everybody cuts corners. Everybody bends things a little. Then one day you wake up and realize you stop seeing people." Emily's eyes filled slightly. "You ruin lives, Dad." "I know. You laughed at people." Whitaker closed his eyes. That part haunted him most. Not the arrest. Not the prison sentence. The laughter. The memory of himself mocking frightened people who came into court already drowning. "I thought fear meant respect," he whispered. Emily shook her head slowly. "No. Fear just means people are waiting for you to lose." The visit ended shortly afterward. Whitaker watched his daughter walk away through reinforced glass and understood something for the first time in his life. Power had made him lonely long before prison ever did. Meanwhile, Mayor Vance Brooks accepted a plea agreement that required full financial restitution to displaced families. The once polished politician now looked hollow on television. Every interview ended the same way. "I made mistakes." But people in Oak Creek hated that phrase now. Mistakes were accidents. What happened there had been choices. And the town refused to let language soften the truth anymore. One evening, months after the arrests, Lydia attended a community meeting at the rebuilt recreation center. The room overflowed with residents. Some came to thank her. Others came because they still didn't trust any institution and needed reassurance the rebuilding wasn't another trick. Lydia preferred those people. Skepticism meant they were thinking. A woman stood near the back holding a toddler on her hip. "My husband lost our house because of those fines," she said. "We lived in motels for 2 years. My son stopped talking during that time." The room fell silent. "But last week," the woman continued, tears filling her eyes, he started speaking again. She kissed the child's forehead. "He asked if we were finally safe." Lydia felt her chest tighten painfully. Children. Always the children. They absorbed everything adults tried to hide. Fear. Stress. Humiliation. And they carried it quietly. "What did you tell him?" Lydia asked gently. The woman smiled through tears. "I told him yes." The entire room applauded softly. Not loudly. Not theatrically. The kind of applause people give when they understand survival instead of victory. After the meeting, Lydia walked outside alone. Snow crunched beneath her shoes. The courthouse stood several blocks away, glowing beneath yellow streetlights. Different judges worked there now. Different clerks. Different deputies. The building looked identical. But the atmosphere had changed completely. Fear no longer controlled the room. And that mattered. Because institutions remember behavior. Cruelty spreads when it goes unpunished. But accountability spreads too. A young public defender named Elena Ramirez stepped outside after her. You know, Elena said carefully, every law student in the state studies the Oak Creek hearings now. Lydia raised an eyebrow. That sounds unfortunate for the students. Elena laughed softly. No, they study it because it reminded people what judges are supposed to be. Lydia looked toward the courthouse. For a long time, Elena continued, most of us thought surviving the system meant becoming emotionally numb. But you proved something different. What's that? That dignity matters. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled faintly. The law is just words on paper unless somebody chooses to enforce it with integrity. Elena nodded slowly. You really scared a lot of judges. Good, Lydia replied. They should be scared. The next spring, flowers bloomed again along 4th Street. A block party stretched through the neighborhood. Music played. Children ran through sprinklers. Local businesses reopened. And outside the Caldwell Community Legal Center, a mural had been painted across the side wall. It showed ordinary people standing together beneath scales of justice. Not judges. Not politicians. People. At the center of the mural was a simple sentence. Justice begins when somebody finally listens. Lydia stood across the street, studying it quietly while holding a paper plate with barbecue and baked beans. Trevor walked beside her. You know, he said, Washington still expects you back full-time. They'll survive. You really love this place now, don't you? Lydia watched Kayla laughing with children near the sidewalk while Darius argued with an old man about football nearby. Then she looked toward the courthouse one final time. No, she said softly. I love what it became. And for the first time in decades, Oak Creek finally belonged to its people again.